let me know when we're
It
recording.
says live now.
Okay, great. Thank you. So today, hello again. It's Wednesday, March 17th, 10:11 a.m. This is the second half of Senate Natural Resources and Energy Committee's morning session. We are doing a variety of work this morning. Right now, we're going to do a quick look at Bill S-119. As Senator Westman pointed out, sponsored by half the committee.
Over half.
Over half, 60% already. And the purpose, so it's S-119, an act relating to establishing a community energy program. And the whole point of it really was that we've had a bit of a struggle in the last, I'd say, 3-4 years over net metering as one of the primary programs for solar generation versus larger scale, lower priced generation of renewable energy. So the idea was, okay, net metering was originally designed for, well suited to so-called spinning your meter backwards at home, but it's not well suited to delivering larger amounts of power at a lower cost to the owners and any utility buying that power. So this proposes, we'll just jump to definitions, that a community energy plant is a renewable energy plant, qualifies as group net metering, but for its capacity, with a capacity greater than 500 kW and less than 5 megawatts, and then commissioned after passage. So the idea was allowing the current limit, as people might remember, for net metering is 500 kW. So this says, let's concentrate on things bigger than that and see what benefits we could get. It establishes the program, and I think the purpose is laid out right there. So it's basically an opportunity to see if we could all do better. I know, for instance, there have also been concerns that the renewable energy community, in terms of the business side of it, has seen fewer opportunities to do solar work and development in the state of Vermont. So that's an industry that we've supported in the past and want to continue to support. Does this create another opportunity for them as well as for the consumers of clean power? The next sections actually walk through how you would determine what the rates would be, and I think we can just say something very briefly, and we can come back when we really dig into it. But it starts with, instead of a retail rate, that the notion of spinning your meter backwards, it starts with an avoided cost. So if a utility were to be buying this power, what rate would it pay to buy comparable power elsewhere? And that would be the baseline. So it's basically something akin to a wholesale price. Then on top of it, there's a whole section related to adjustments. And these are an effort to try to bring into the conversation. You would have this base price, and then on top of it, you could stack what we've called over the year adders. And so one of the things we're always trying to do is make sure that people cite that projects developed are well cited. So that is consistent with existing law about preferred sites or locations. We've also talked about one of the ways to define that is aesthetics, and that you fit in with a town plan. Another way to define a preferred location, not that I want to conflate things, is the grid condition. So we don't want people adding more renewable in a place where the grid is already strained. And this feature reflects the current situation in the Shiai area, where they're already curtailing renewable energy. Why would we want to inject more power even in that? So you could have, in addition to positive adjustments, here it proposes to create a negative adjustment if you are trying to propose one of these in a constrained area. So the point is that we're starting to build pricing that reflects a more nuanced set of values on top of a base wholesale price. Then there's grid services, another positive adjustment. So if the addition of this facility could help the grid's performance. Another thing we've talked about over the years is there are, some people say, up to 80% of Vermonters, by virtue of either being renters or the orientation of their roof or shade trees or how the roof was constructed, they're not well suited to hosting their own net metering. So could we build solar that is designed to support people in the community in which the solar is being constructed? And then there's an explicit outreach to residential, municipal, education, and nonprofit organizations. Commercial or industrial customers. So another category, if there's a business that can use a large portion of the energy from a facility, then you could, that would be well sited. That load would be consumed locally. It reduces costs to the grid in general. That too could be another adjuster. And then we get into talking about tradable renewable energy credits and other adjustments. So the whole point is of the bill to have a base price plus a series of adjusters that can be changed over time, because we can see the grid is evolving. And one of the things that's not mentioned explicitly here, but we could be talking about, is would such an array include associated battery storage? Then that lets us level out the rate at which power flows from that facility. And you might even further enhance the value of that battery storage by letting it be under the control of the utility to which it's connected. So it's an evolving world, and this tries to create an evolving, a structure to accommodate evolving generation and use. It contemplates a rollout in phases. In phase one, you would build a total of up to 250 megawatts. Then there's a cumulative capacity of 250. Gotta slow down here. Phase one is 50. So this is, in essence, we get started, and there's an opportunity to pause after 50 if we said, this is having unintended consequences, so let's adjust the program. If things are operating well, then you might continue right on and get all the way up to the remaining 200 of the 250 that the bill contemplates. It does annual reporting so we can keep our eye on what's happening. And the kind of adjustments that we were talking about making get established through a rule process. We can, if people want, we can slow down, but the basic, it works. Let me back up a little. Sorry, I'm going too fast. There's a rulemaking, and it addresses a variety of things that we've been talking about in the last 5 minutes. So how to get approvals, transfer certificates, the duties of electrical providers, standard things that you would think we would address, like safety, quality interconnect, resolution of disputes, the manner in which bill credits are applied, and then as you know, we always there's only a window. There's a zeroing out of credits on a regular interval. Under net metering, you have a year to use credits, and then they would lapse and basically stay with the utility that you're taking service from. And then there's an effective date. So that's really it. It's there's nothing. I'd say a lot of the things, pretty much everything in here are things we've talked about as opportunities or problems in the last 3 years, 4 years. And frankly, no, we haven't had any takers for this in previous years, but I've reached out to the utilities and to Renewable Energy Vermont, and they seem to be some more interest. So, and then on top of that, we sort of had this windfall of the governor proposing a low income renewable energy allocation of $10 million to support the creation of facilities that I think would be very much like this, but that would have special features to target them to low income Vermonters. And the opportunity there is, if you are either subsidizing or quote unquote buying a panel or one or more panels for a low income family, in essence, you're providing them with free electricity for whatever is generated by those panels for a decade or more. So it's a way of addressing energy burden. And with that, I'll stop. I just wanted to get the bill on the table and make people aware of it. Any questions about the bill? Let me stop share so we can see each other. Okay, Senator McCormick. All right, great. So that's the bill. I'd like to, so let me check and see the level of interest. Is this something that the committee is interested in looking into more later this week or next? I would say that we would invite in VEC to talk about their program, for instance, or utilities more broadly, but also learn from VEC, because the low income piece seems like there's a good fit with what VEC has already developed. In fact, I think VEC may have inspired the department to bring forward the governor's proposal, as well as to talk to REV to see what the developer community thinks about it, as well as other utilities. I would schedule that if people are interested. So let me just take a look around. Anyone, any feelings one way or the other? Okay, so.
I'm just mad you didn't ask me to sign on.
I circulated it to every member of the Senate.
You didn't, you didn't ask me to sign on.
Failure to twist arms.
I mean, all you needed to do was, and yes, I think you should start with Vermont Electric, to be completely clear, as somebody that's on the board there and has been there through the development of projects in Alburgh, Grand Isle, and now Heinsberg. We've had some success at Vermont Electric moving these along, and I think to have the general public be able to buy into projects would be great.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator McCormick.
Thank you. To soothe the ruffled feathers of the senator from Lamoille, I would point out that the mountain of emails these days, I've always triaged, throw it out, take care of it immediately, take care of this eventually. I now have 2 take care of this immediately piles, take care of this immediately, and take care of this immediately, really. So I suspect that the senator from Addison did indeed invite co-sponsorship, and it is somewhere in the mountain of emails.
It's definitely in the mountain of emails.
Yeah, it was to make sure I didn't miss anyone, I sent it to all Senate. But next time, watch for a bouquet on your doorstep with a bill attached.
I'm just saying,
Mr. Chair, declare the senator with us as a sponsor in spirit.
Right.
Actually,
Okay.
can't you? You can get your name added, can't you?
Can I?
I
I've never,
yes, I
I
think
think-
in all my years, I've never done that.
No, Bloomer
If
and
you-
Vanessa don't like it. They roll their eyes and they exhale audibly, but they'll do it, I think.
yeah, I was going to say the Senate Secretary can do a lot of things. Sometimes he doesn't like them, but he can still do them.
Oh, okay.
Next,
Great. All right. So thank you, everyone. And sorry to leave anyone out. I knew that would happen somewhere along the line. Good morning, Senator Collimore and Commissioner Porter. Thanks for coming. We're running just a little behind. And Senator Collimore is here in case people don't have their agenda in front of them to introduce, along with Commissioner Porter, S112, an act relating to proposed changes to Act 250. This committee developed a resolution which the Senate passed disapproving of the executive order earlier this session that was going to reorganize aspects of primarily the Natural Resources Board. And in so doing, it was based on our conclusion, unanimous conclusion, that there were so many substantive changes going on, and we saw potential unintended consequences that we thought that the legislative process would be a much better venue for all of us to work together to address anything in Act 250. In that resolution, we also invited the governor's office to bring forward language, and we would be happy to receive it. So here we are, that day's arrived. Thanks, Senator Collimore, for coming in. And Commissioner Porter, as I understand it, you're kind of the administration's point person on Act 250. I don't know if that's generally or to this committee.
For both, generally, I would say. And thanks for having me. And I'll let Senator Collimore introduce the bill. But if you have questions that are administration specific, happy to field them. Thank you.
Okay, great. So thank you, Senator Collimore, for coming. And just for everyone, to be clear, because we are beyond crossover, and this is a morning committee, which may only have approximately 4 more, a little hard to say, 4 or 5 more weeks of meetings. And Act 250 is a large undertaking. I just want to be, so we all have the same expectations. We'll want to introduce it. I think we'll be taking, we'll get a start, but I don't see the capacity for the committee to actually do a full Act 250 bill this year. Nonetheless, the offer to the administration was genuine. And so here we are. So with that long preamble, Senator Collimore, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Senator Bray. And for the record, Brian Collimore, State Senator from Rutland County, and I do appreciate the chair's willingness to entertain this bill and the committee's desire to at least hear the details. So what I'm planning to do, and I hope I can do it in about 15 or 20 minutes, is provide a high-level overview of the bill. If you have it in front of you, that's fine. If you don't, I think I can cover it just by reading it. But you'll see 14 bullet points at the very beginning of the bill. And I'm going to sort of try to provide an explanation, a brief one of each of those bullet points. And then again, if there are questions, either Commissioner Porter or I will try to answer. And I'm off to another joint ag hearing as soon as we finish here. So this bill appears complicated because Act 250, quite frankly, is complicated. I was in Vermont back in 1970 when it was first passed. I don't think there's anyone left in the legislature that had a vote on that, but I do remember it going into effect. I believe Governor Davis was the governor at the time. While it's a bill proposed in partnership with the administration, it's a bill that attempts to answer what people with a variety of perspectives would like to see amended in our most important land use law. In its simplest form, the bill would modernize Act 250 to prepare for the increasing complexity of both projects and criteria. It would recognize the increasing level of regulation and oversight which has come into existence over the last half century, including at the local level through municipal regulation and at the state level through environmental rules. It does recognize though, that there is a desire to strengthen oversight of development in some areas of the state, particularly in remote areas where we do want to preserve our forests and wildlife habitat. At the same time, recognizes that we want to encourage and in fact incentivize development in downtown areas and other centers of growth. Lastly, it encourages the creation of the kind of businesses which we want to see more of, precisely because they will help keep forest and farmland in production. So the first bullet point would change the Natural Resources Board to a professional board. They would have 3 full-time members on it who will hear major permit applications. The NRB will have authority to revoke Act 250 permits and may delegate authority to the District Commission over determining the type of application and the ability to issue minor and amendments. So this change would result in decisions on major cases only being made by a group made up of 3 professional members of the NRB and then 2 members from the District Commission in the area of the state in which that project would be cited. This would result in greater expertise and additional capacity among the board while preserving local input through the engagement of 2 local members. So if you take a look back from 2015 to 2019, the NRB reported an average of 39 major and 225 minor applications a year. That percentage is working out to about 85% minor and only 15% major permit applications. This is especially important if we're to ask the 250 process to take on matters like forest fragmentation and climate change, which are big, complex questions which involve evaluating impacts on larger portions of our state. It's important given the increasing scope and complexity of some of those projects. The next provision would add ethical standards for the NRB and district commissions that would bar ex parte communications. This improves and adds to the standards by which those decision-making processes operate. The next provision changes the path of permit appeals by removing jurisdiction of the Environmental Division of the Superior Court, and the appeals of the permit decisions would now go straight to the Supreme Court. This would result in allowing appeals to be more streamlined and, quite frankly, to take advantage of the facts of cases as they were presented in the original Act 250 case, rather than having to start from scratch again. Appeals would be on the record and they would go to the Vermont Supreme Court. The next provision would add a pre-application scoping process for larger projects. This would recognize that on this large, complex project, it makes sense to engage in some work with the applicants early on in the process to improve the application, reduce impacts from the project, and streamline the process. This would also benefit neighbors and communities, as it would provide them with notice of projects and allow the resolution of some questions before the application is ever made. The next provision creates an enhanced designation process for village centers. This would set out what additional standards village centers would need if they were to gain access to the reduced regulatory process outlined in this bill for downtowns. The next provision exempts development in subdivisions located in those designated downtowns, along now with the advanced or enhanced, I should say, village centers and neighborhood development areas from Act 250. Municipal panels will transfer Act 250 permit conditions to municipal land use permits. The development centers in towns and cities with these designations would be exempt from Act 250, provided that they meet the higher standards outlined in their municipal permits. This is a recognition that there have been significant increases in municipal land use and environmental regulation since the creation of Act 250, and some of it is overlapping and redundant. It's also a recognition that we want to encourage development in these historic settlement areas. The next provision allows the NRB to release projects from Act 250 jurisdiction if the property would no longer trigger Act 250 jurisdiction. This allows the reduced Act 250 oversight on projects which obtained Act 250 permits, which are no longer relevant. The next provision excludes previously disturbed areas from the definition of development if they are transportation facilities. This would allow for more streamlined permitting of V-Trans projects when there's already an existing transportation infrastructure today. In other words, where the land has already been disturbed and built on for transportation purposes. The next provision updates the water, transportation, and energy conservation criteria, which would modernize and increase the expectations for these criteria for Act 250 projects to recognize modern scientific and technical standards. The next provision adds a new criterion for climate adaptation and requires rules to address how to meet the new criterion. This meets the goal of considering climate change in Act 250 decisions. Next would create a new permit to address impacts on fish and wildlife habitat. The new permit would be required for applicants of an Act 250 permit. The permit would be issued by the Commissioner of Fish and Wildlife. The permit fee would be $150 plus the cost of any department resources spent on the permit, rather than the current sort of informal process in which Fish and Wildlife works with developers and then negotiates to minimize impacts on wildlife habitat. This would formalize and bring certainty to the wildlife criteria, as well as creating a permit fee system to pay for this work at Fish and Wildlife, currently paid for with money from hunters, anglers, and recreational shooters. The department would work with developers, much as it does today, to reduce the impact of projects, but instead of an informal agreement, the department would issue a formal permit, which would have a presumption of compliance with the wildlife-related criteria of Act 250. Just 3 provisions left, fellas. The next one would specify when permit conditions may be added to permits for forest-based enterprises. This would encourage the creation and continuation of forest-based enterprises like sawmills. This is important both for the economic benefits provided, but also because a healthy forestry and wood products industry allows landowners to continue keeping their land in working forest and continue to slow down development. The next would exempt from the definition of development accessory on-farm businesses. This would be constructed on less than 1 acre. This is similar to the forest-based enterprise section above, but would help keep farm businesses viable. Again, it has to be on less than 1 acre. And finally, a provision which would require a municipality to respond to a request for information within 90 days. Municipalities would retain their ability to engage in Act 250, but if they did not respond within 90 days to that chance to engage, then the project would be allowed to move ahead. So those are the 14 provisions of the bill, and I certainly will yield to Commissioner Porter for any specific questions on it. And again, thank you very much for the ability to introduce the bill today.
Great. Senator Collimore, you said you need to head off to a meeting.
I do. There's a joint meeting with House Ag. It's actually already started.
Okay. So unless there are any sort of pressing questions for Senator Collimore, let's go to Commissioner Porter. Thank you, Senator Collimore.
Thank you very much, committee. A pleasure.
Bye-bye. Commissioner Porter, so we got the 60,000 foot flyby. I don't know if there's anything, obviously there's, it's a 64-page bill, so there's a lot that we could look at, but I don't know if there's anything in particular that you wanted to pause and highlight or draw our attention to as particularly important at the moment. I know it's a big package.
It is. I would just underscore something that Senator Collimore said, which is when we were putting this bill together, we really made an effort to try to incorporate things that we knew was of legislative interest and of interest by this committee, as well as things that were administration priorities. So while we worked with Senator Collimore to develop the bill, I do think it's important to note that there are pieces in here that we included, knowing that they might be of interest to this committee and to your legislative colleagues, even if they were not necessarily administration priorities. So I just wanted to underscore that point, and I and my executive branch colleagues would be happy to testify and to work on any of the elements of this. Obviously, some of the expertise is within my department, but others are in other agencies within the state government. Thank you.
Okay, great. So I gave a look through, but briefly before today, and I'm just wondering, one of the other things that we talked about at length and wrestled with last year was recreational trails and Act 250. Can you offer any kind of update related? There was the hope that a recreational trails working group working with Forest Parks and Rec, not your division, but it seems like you and Commissioner Snyder work closely on this stuff together. Can you give us an update on where that stands relative to this big package of things here?
Certainly, and as you say, Chair Bray, the FPR department and my department work closely on these issues, and the administration is gathering response and feedback to a proposal that we put forward currently from a variety of groups. And I don't know if there will be a proposed legislative piece to that, but obviously when we were putting this bill together, we sort of have a invisible placeholder if there is trails legislation needed, if there's legislative changes that are come out of that process.
Okay, so it sounds like I think the report that there was also in the governor's EO from when he vetoed the, I forget, it made him an H926 or whatever it was, our Act 250 bill last spring. The EO that issued after included a report from, I think it was FPR or in March. So I don't know if that's, or maybe it was April 1st. And I think it was April 1st. The concern was it was going to arrive so late in the session that we might not have time to respond. And I don't know if you know anything about that report. So I'm sorry, I'm asking about things that are not
Sure.
quite your bailiwick.
Well, it's a fair question because we work on them as well, and I know that FPR is working on that report and that response to the legislature. And I get your point about the timeliness and the length of the session, but I know that FPR is working on that, and we have been collaborating with them on that, and so it's on its way.
Okay, great, thanks. Just wanted to check while we're here, and it was kind of on the table because of the Act 250 bill.
Sure.
Any committee questions for Commissioner Porter? Something you want to get into a little bit? I know it's just we're just teeing it up at the moment, but I don't know, while he is with us, I don't know if you have other questions. Anyone has questions you want to ask? We also have counsel with us, Senator McCormick.
Thanks. I think my views are pretty well known on downtown exemptions. And I do have alternative language on that I'll be offering that I think accomplishes the same thing. But I just want to mention that I want to tell you about something I support in this, which is the recognizing that sometimes an Act 250 permit is granted for a particular kind of project, and it follows the land, it stays with the land and the project. And specifically, I had in my jurisdiction a ski area that had an Act 250 permit, and the ski area went out of business. There is no ski area there, and the lifts are gone, and the base lodge burned, and there is no ski area. However, any even minor type development on the land that was once that ski area is now requires an Act 250 permit amendment. And I think that probably is unreasonable, and that probably suspending the authority of the permit in those cases probably makes sense. Since I've been so hostile to a lot of efforts at frankly weakening Act 250, that I just wanted you to know I am capable of supporting your efforts sometimes. If I agree with you.
Well, thank you for that. And our intent there, like yours, is to make sure that Act 250 conditions, which are appropriate, stay on appropriate projects.
Yeah.
And if they are no longer appropriate, they get removed. To the downtown for a second, if I could, Senator, I'm interested in any approach that encourages people when they develop to develop in downtowns. You know, my mission, my mandate is wildlife and wildlife habitat. And we know people need places to live and to work, and they're going to build. And to the extent that we can encourage them through whatever mechanism to do that in our downtowns and the settled parts of the state, I think that's good. And this is our approach to doing that. It may not be the right one. There may be others that do the same thing, and we're open to that. Thank you.
Well, also the flight from urban areas over COVID and the enthusiasm we all seem to have for Zoom and working from home, I think makes our undeveloped areas more vulnerable than ever.
You know, in a large part of my interest in advancing this bill is recognition that Vermont is going to become an increasingly desirable place to be as climate change has a greater and greater impact. And I want to make sure that those additional people who come to the state do so in a way that fits our historic development patterns. For wildlife, but for our state as well. And so that's really, I would say in the back of my mind, but it's not in the back of my mind. It's actually in the front of my mind that we're going to see, I would say, a large increase in people coming to the state in the next 10 and 20 years for that reason. And I think it's important to make sure we're prepared for that, not to prevent it, but to absorb it and encourage it in the right way. Thank you.
And protecting our open, undeveloped green areas is an important element of that, but also encouraging development where we do want it is equal. And you and I and the administration, we are on the same page on that. I would like to do it in a way that does not involve Act 50 exemptions, and I think it can be done.
Understood. We'll have many conversations about this. I look forward to them.
Okay. Yeah, I was looking at when Madeline Kuhn was governor, she convened a statewide conference on the future of Vermont. I mean, we seem to have one of these about every 10 years. And it reviewed the population growth in Vermont from something like 1960 to 1980. And it was an astounding number to me. I mean, something like 160,000 people moved to Vermont. I had forgotten just how big a surge it was. You know, it's not inconceivable that things could change and we would have more people arriving than we might have ever guessed.
There's this is a brief bill introduction, so not to take too much of your time and put you too off schedule here, but there's an interesting report just done by ProPublica on which counties in the United States will be most impacted by climate change, where the effects will be most severe, acknowledging that there will be serious effects everywhere. And the 14 counties of Vermont are among the least impacted by issues like water and drought and other things. And so I think we are wise to prepare for the potential of an influx of people similar to the one you just mentioned, Senator.
Well, thanks for that. If you can remember, if you could send that along, I missed that one in the avalanche or tornado or tsunami of emails this year.
Yeah,
so that'd be interesting. Thank you.
I will send it to you. Thank you.
Every email.
Send it. Could you send it to Senator Westman twice, please?
I'll CC Senator Westman. Yes.
All right. Thanks. Any other comments or questions for Commissioner Porter? All right. Thanks for coming in and getting us started on it today.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay. So committee, we're on the home stretch for the morning. Wanted to go back and thank you, Ms. Chakowski. Did you have anything you wanted to share with us, or I know we didn't know quite how far we would get into that bill, and we had asked you to come in. So unless you were feeling like something you wanted to flag for us on Act 250, I would like to check in with you on one thing. Can you fill us in on what's going on the House side on Act 250? My understanding was there are at least two bills. I don't know if you as council can say, oh, well, one or more of them is actually quite active in committee, or they're for the most part on the wall.
So they're all on the wall. I'm sorry, Ellen Tchaikovsky, Office of Legislative Counsel. That's an awkward question for me to answer because crossover, we're in the middle of crossover, right? So I did not spend any time with House Natural working on Act 250 legislation. However, yesterday, the House Committee on Natural Resources began work on their housekeeping bill related to the natural resources subjects. So they do have some housekeeping language related to Act 250 that the Natural Resources Board, I think, pitched to your committee, making some minor changes to their calendar days, the way that they count for notice. So they have begun looking at that language.
Okay. All right. Great. All right. That's very helpful. All right. And so having addressed any more Act 250 questions, if not, then I would go back to S101, which we don't have, but again, we took more testimony this morning on the sections 10 and 11 of that bill and had witnesses in. So my sense is that of where the committee is at, based on our testimony through this before today, was that we were generally supporting, sections 10 and 11. However, we had some serious testimony this morning. I don't know if that changes anyone's position on it, so I just want to pause and see if that's altered anyone's thinking, because I was aware of some of the serious issues, not quite the depth and breadth of the issues that came up in this morning's testimony. I did spend some time with the wastewater division and looking at the details of the rules that they use to make these connections. And I think one thing that I would like to propose, if we were to go ahead, and I'm saying if, that I would want to dot the I's and cross the T's on that. If there is a municipal level certification that the qualifications of the basically a municipality would be allowed to make a connection, that the qualifications of the person authorizing that would be the same as if A&R itself were reviewing the permit. So it would not create a more casual system for allowing a connection. It doesn't address the bigger issues we heard about the inadequacy of our wastewater treatment facility systems around the state. I fully acknowledge that, but if the delegation of connection authority is allowed to move from A&R down to a municipality, I understand the arguments for doing that, removing duplication, saving time, possibly saving money. Those all seem fine to me as long as the outcomes, the tests, whether or not it's an appropriate thing to do, are just the same, regardless of who does them. That it would only make sense to delegate to me if we were going to keep it as strict. I guess that's my way of saying it. And I asked Mike O'Grady actually to check in with, because he had worked on some of this with us last year, to work with Brian Redmond at A&R to propose a language that would make it completely clear and explicit that you still needed the same level of qualifications if you're going to authorize a municipal level connection. So I'm just putting that on the table. I just want to check in on the bigger picture that we got to look at this morning. Expired NEPDES permits, anti-degradation rules that are years behind, and the general concern about CSOs, all of which are, I would say, frankly, bad news. And I think they've been brought to our attention by the fact that this section 10 and 11 issue came up. So I don't know how people are thinking their way through this. It's a balancing act, and I'm looking to the committee just to see if you have some thoughts or reactions. Senator McCormick.
Thanks. Mr. Chairman, it's a dirty trick on the chair for members to suddenly spring surprises, and I hope I'm not springing a surprise here. I thought that I had expressed some doubt about delegating the protection of the state's waters, the waters of the state, delegating that to the municipalities. Of course, every power a municipality has is a delegation from the state. So we do delegate all the time. The very existence of municipal governments are a delegation. But as the Brigham decision said, the state may delegate authority, it may not delegate responsibility. Right. And I think that the state government is responsible for the condition of the waters of the state. And so I had expressed some doubt. I do understand that a failure to say no is not the same thing as saying yes. I understand that. So if I was not as clear as I thought I was, I have been moving towards wanting these sections removed from the bill all along, and was holding back as a matter of reserving judgment until I'd heard all. Yeah. A full examination.
Absolutely. You thank you for your, as every chair appreciates not having surprises. And you had already signaled your unease about this before. So thank you for your care in that. And I think, so Senator McDonell.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, what was, I want to say, disconcerting or alarming from this morning's testimony on water quality was that it's just simply not allowed. The decision to what appears to be to simply allow the municipality to certify that the connection of additional wastewater has been made in a secure fashion. And the notion that that towns are in arrears in renewing their permits, they're operating without a permit. Both of those things deprive the public from the opportunity to weigh in and be heard. When you take Act 250 out in the downtown bills for certain aspects, when they involve water quality issues and the Act 250 is passed along to the municipalities, that is yet a third time when the public simply does not have a public forum to come and speak to on hooking up more homes to wastewater solutions. So it's the notion that we're caught in the only change we're making is a bureaucratic simplification isn't entirely valid. While we're doing those simplifications or streamlining, as some folks might call them, in each case, the public the public hearings that would ordinarily take place seem to disappear or become less usable. So.
Well, and to the extent, for instance, one of the things I shared in caucus was that the ability of a wastewater treatment system to accept new connection is defined as part of their NEPDES permit. Well, I was relying on the concept that all NEPDES permits were, in full force and up to date. I was simply unaware of how many were expired. So then it is troublesome. Now, someone might have a completely solid explanation for how they operate, even though they're quote unquote expired, whatever. We haven't heard it, and I feel like I'm walking on thinner ice than I ever thought I was on.
Yes, you're
I
being
start
pushed out
relying
on thinner ice, Mr. Chair, and it's got to be a difficult feeling when that wasn't what you set out to do.
No. So, my sense is that we should take more testimony from the agency to better understand how we have so many expired permits, what the relationship with the 1272s is, what the opportunity for public engagement is. Again, if the process were working entirely fine and the certification were made at the local level with the same level of rigor as the state, then I'd say, okay, functionally it will be equivalent. But now I'm uncertain as to whether or not it will work that way. And I believed until yesterday that it was going to be functionally equivalent. So
you are not alone, Mr. Chair, in that feeling.
Senator Westman?
I just would correct slightly Senator McDonell's statement that the communities are behind. What I took from that is that the agency has not certified. I think application was made by the local community, but it didn't go any further. That's why I think the agency needs to come in and explain what's happening. I didn't take it from that the communities were behind. I took it that the agency hadn't gone through with what its part was, but I might be wrong.
Well, I welcome the correction. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Senator McCormick.
Thanks. I've got to admit that when I express my anxiety about authority shifting from the state to municipalities, it's not as though the state has been delivering a stellar performance in this matter. And I just got that. I see that as the weak point of my own argument is that I'm not sure we really do a very good job of protecting our environment by continuing to leave it in the hands of the state.
Right. Okay, so we should hear from I think it sounds like unanimous. We need to check in with the agency and better understand what's going on this one. Happily, 101 is in finance, and then it's got to get to I believe it also has to stop at a probe, so probably not on the floor till next week. And I'll work with Jude and schedule in people ASAP. So we want to hear from the agency. Anyone else we want to hear from? I guess, I'd be curious to hear again from DNRC, who we generally think of as sort of environmental watchdogs. Kate McCarthy was in speaking on behalf of sections 10 and 11. So it might be helpful to hear what it is that gives them comfort. Anyone else? I guess I'm back to my regular formula. What questions do we have, and who would we like to hear from to get answers? ANR, NRC. Okay. So I'll see how quickly we can get people into the committee to help us. Again, for anyone listening, I don't want to be impugning anyone. We've had testimony that suggests things And so, as always, we need to take more testimony to get to the facts of the case. So we'll keep going because I think we certainly still have questions. And appreciate having the questions because we're not interested in engaging in wishful thinking about any of these things. So, all right. One other bill that we had and we voted out was to bring an amendment with the understanding we, rather than a bill report, we bring an amendment to the floor. What is the compost bill? And I just wanted to check in with the committee. I would say based on the testimony we had yesterday, I would be inclined to remove the sunset provisions, and because the consequences are more dire than I originally understood. And I was thinking that operators that went ahead in intervening time would in essence be grandfathered in as long as they stood up programs that were well constructed. If changes were made downstream to the regulatory regime, that they would still operate. Well, because of the consequences of being a farm or not being a farm are so far reaching, that's not true. So I would like to propose removing that section from the amendment and adding in some reporting, so at least we have some way to track what's going on, so that if we start to see unintended consequences, we could respond sooner rather than later. The other thing I got testimony back from Chris Cochran at ACCD about the designated areas and the total acreage in Vermont that's in growth centers, which was the biggest category in terms of acreage, is 8,900 acres statewide, which he calculated was 0.014% of Vermont's landmass. So it doesn't seem like a very aggressive exclusion to make, from my point of view. So now I'm editorializing. It seems like if out of 620 whatever, I forget the numbers now, over 600,000 acres, we're going to exclude 8,900. It seems as though we've left a lot of territory left for as suitable spots for compost farming.
Amen.
So I'd propose that we keep that in, be a little bit prudent, avoiding conflicts, because by their very name, growth centers are designed to fill in. So whether the people filling in will come to the nuisance or the nuisance will come to them, we're setting up a higher likelihood of conflict, and it seems easy to avoid. So those were the two things that I was going to offer to the committee as suggestions. And if you're in agreement, I would go ahead and ask Mike O'Grady to redraft those two changes. Senator McDonell, yes. Senator Westman, yes. Senator McCormick, yes. Okay, so I'll ask Michael for those.
I just want to say I'm glad that because the sunset idea I didn't like from the beginning.
Okay.
Well, the only thing worse, Mr. Chair, would be a sunrise provision. Imagine the roosters.
I don't know if my mic picks up groaning. Okay. Okay. All right. And that was our last business. So thanks to everyone for hanging in there. We did a little bit of channel surfing today across a variety of bills, but such is the nature of the moment. Tomorrow, we're going to hear some testimony in the morning on S109. We don't have it, but I've continued to have conversations with members individually, as well as Senator Perchlik from Transportation, who has a longstanding interest in energy issues generally because of his work. So let's continue the conversation about tuning the bill. For instance, there are a couple things that I think merit further conversation. For instance, if we move money through the Energy Savings Fund, and we're actually trying to make a one-time money last 2 years, it's possible money will reside in that fund for, who knows, a year before they're finally ready to spend some portion of it. I don't know the right way for the legislature to have some appropriate level of involvement in the discussions about how allocations could take place or might change. Like we live and learn, we might change our mind. I don't really want us to be in the place of speak now or forever hold your peace, like we pass the money off in this bill, and then we have no ability to influence downstream of here. I know that for Joint Fiscal Committee, sometimes they're in the unenviable position of receiving proposals from the administration, then it's kind of an up or down vote on the proposal as opposed to a discussion amongst equals to shape the decision. And so it's just a question or a concern in my mind at this point. And I wanted to consult with Senator Westman, maybe Chair Kitchell, for looking for some advice on how we keep ourselves involved at the appropriate level. There's a reason that they have it. They're in business 365 days a year and we go home. But I would not like us to be entirely out of business for 7 months of the year on these projects and talking about projects as they move. So that was one thing. Then we also need to sort out the actual mechanics of how the bill's moving. Does the money get stripped out and travel in the big bill or not? And that's not yet been decided. So there are things to continue to look at. Senator Perchlik had some ideas about things he thought might be a worthwhile investment while we are allocating $35 million. For instance, there are declining funds available for the state's advanced wood heat projects. Would it be useful to think about advanced wood heat as yet another tool in the toolkit that we're building in this bill? And then I know that for VHFA and EVT, they continue to have conversations, I think pretty much almost on a daily basis, as they think about how that working relationship might work. I appreciate that they're doing that. In the end, though, we're writing the check. So I really want us to have a clear description that we understand before we make a final recommendation to appropriations on how we hope those funds will be allocated. So that's it on housekeeping on my list. I don't know if anyone else sees anything else for us to be aware of and keep an eye on. It's a little tricky. We have a lot of bills moving around, and it's good to have more than one set of eyes trying to keep track of them all. Senator McCormick.
Yep, we don't actually have the Economic Development Committee's housing bill. What is your understanding of the timing on that?
It's in finance right now. If it comes out of finance, I believe it has to go to approps. So I'm guessing approps gets it out by Friday. I know that they're busy right now on the Senator Westman was filling me in a little bit. They're busy with the fast track COVID bill. So that they've got a lot on their plate right now. I'm guessing it doesn't come out much before Friday, which puts it on notice next week. And so maybe floor action, we would need, I would want to have an amendment if we were going to offer one ready. Yeah. Friday would be ideal, just so we don't ever come up short on the floor with the bill moving sooner than we thought.
Do we have time for more testimony?
Yes. Yeah. We'll make time. I think. Yes. Well, it's pressing, so I'll see if we can get A&R in here tomorrow. they are actually already scheduled for Friday and on another matter. And if the soonest we can get them is Friday, I would say, okay, we'll swap out the other matter, which is not timely, as timely as this, and we would switch over to that. So we already have them scheduled for 9 a.m. Friday. I'd like to see if we could even get them tomorrow. Okay.
Thank you,
All
Mr.
right.
Chair.
Thank you, everyone, for help today. And again, thanks, Senator McCormick, for asking for additional witnesses. You know, when I say, what questions do we have and who do we want to hear from? I always mean it. And there's always a temptation, I think, when you think you're sort of closing down and getting ready to vote something, you know, that hearing from yet another witness can sometimes seem like an unwelcome idea, right? Because you're just about to vote or something. But inevitably, I always find it's useful to slow down and hear from more people, even if it's a
Mr.
little
Chairman,
maddening.
I very much appreciate the courtesy that I was able to simply make a request and that you were so quick to honor it. Thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome. All right. Well, great. So
Are we on the floor at what time today?
12:30.
12:30? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.